We're going to talk about the jungle today. I love the jungle. The jungle for me was where it was at on selection, right? Let's just to put it into perspective, though, before you get to the jungle, you can't go straight from the hills phase to the jungle. Your body just wouldn't take it. It really wouldn't. So what they do is they build in a couple of weeks, which is like pre-deployment training, getting ready for the jungle. And in this time as well, I think that's when the Ruperts go away and do Ruperts Week. So they do get a bit of a thrashing, but it's more of a mental thrashing to see if they've got what it takes upstairs to become a Rupert in the regiment, all right? Nothing to do with me, that, all right? I was not going to be a Rupert, never going to be a Rupert. Wouldn't have passed as a Rupert, wouldn't even pretend to pass as a Rupert, wouldn't have wanted to pass as a Rupert. So Ruperts did their own thing, so I'm not going to cover what Ruperts did. But for me, we did a little bit of comms training. We learnt some new radios. We did some weapons training because obviously you're going to deploy into the jungle and you're now going to use regiment's weapons. So, you know, the 203s and all that sort of stuff, you're going to get that. There was loads and loads and loads of kit and equipment which possibly you hadn't seen before if you'd never done a jungle trip before. Now, I'd done the jungle before in Kafandini in Kenya, but it wasn't really the same as the jungle that I was about to deploy to in Brunei. So, to that end, you got given a different Bergen. You got given different bits and pieces. You got some water purification stuff, which I hadn't seen before. You got some survival stuff. So there was loads of stuff that literally, I remember going to the stores and like the colour boy had all the stuff laid out for each guy. And there was a stack, half a table's full of gear for every man who was going on selection. It was ridiculous. Every guy that was deploying to the trees had this whole tables full of gear. And I'm like, wow. And, of course, you go in, you sign for it, you get it. And then you got to go back to your room and get it ready and start packing. So that 2 weeks before you go, as well as doing some runs we did some runs in the lanes, but nothing strenuous, was spent doing lessons, all about what to expect. We did some contact drills. We did a river crossing. So all the stuff that they could get into you before you got to the jungle that wouldn't waste time under canopy, you spent that 2 weeks doing that in and around Hereford. And like I say, you had to buy loads of stuff. Report writing, just for one, report writing. You had to go and get some rubber gloves because everything gets wet and sticky, and you used to have to present these ridiculously detailed patrol reports in the jungle, under canopy, and you need to prep yourself for that. You need to make sure you've got all the right chinographs. You've got to make sure you've got pens and papers and all that sort of stuff. So stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think that you would be taking to the jungle was going to the jungle with you. So you had your belt kit, your Bergen, your sort of like ops kit that you were going to be wearing into the trees itself. All right, that was be what you deployed with. But on the side of that, you were allowed to take sort of like a para bag, which would be full of your bits and pieces that you were going to need for things like orders, presentation, and all that sort of stuff. So there's some extra cooking stuff. And then you had sort of like between each squad, and squads at that stage were still at about the 6-man patrol, you would have one bag which would have things. We took a wok. We took this great big wok so you could make chips in the jungle, because every so often you get a fresh day and potatoes and that come in, and you'd hate to not be able to make chips when everybody else had chips, wouldn't you? Or not be able to cook a spud when everyone else could cook a spud. So, you know, you got all this stuff as consideration. That is when it's worth talking to other people that have been on selection, because they'll tell you what you need and what you don't need. But there's enough people to ask up there, okay? So, again, get yourself amongst, get yourself involved, and get yourself fully immersed in that 2 weeks, because the more preparation and the more you can be ready to go to the jungle, the better that your chances are of passing when you get out there. So that's the time to be asking questions. If you don't understand anything, ask the question anyway, okay? Because there's nothing worse than thinking that was a really stupid question and not asking it, and then going out there and that was a really stupid mistake. I wish I'd asked that stupid question, all right? That's what you need to be doing, okay? So that 2 weeks was really chock-a-block. And it's a bit of a blur to me because as well as all this going on, you know, my back was mending from various Bergen burns. My eye was still healing. My toenails were growing back. So it's sort of like the body was going under a bit of a rehabilitation. So that 2 weeks really was required. The Ruperts did their Ruperts Week. They joined us for the last week, and we did sort of like patrolling skills out in the open and contact drills and all that sort of stuff. And we learnt some really cool things. And now, for me, we were soldiering. So we went down to Bryce Norton. We jumped on the planes. We deployed to Brunei. We got off the planes. When we got off the planes at Brunei, the 4-tonners were waiting for us. We got taken to the jungle camp on the outskirts of the jungle. And again, we had roughly a week where we acclimatised. Massively important to acclimatise. Don't forget, I'm on a winter selection. I'm coming from January in Brecon to February, which is ridiculously, stupidly hot in Brunei. Okay, you don't want anybody going down unnecessarily from not being properly prepared. So, all the stuff that you're learning now is all heat stuff. It's all rehydration. It's all the stuff you need to survive in the heat. And you've got to acclimatise and get your body ready before you go into sort of like any protracted period where you're going to be working intensely, okay? So I remember we did these beach runs. Oh, the beach runs. You'd come out of camp on a morning as a squad and the DS would just take off down the beach. Now, I've never been a massively quick runner and I just couldn't keep up. And it was massively off-putting because although you're not being tested, you still are being tested. They're still looking at you, and you don't want to come last, do you? And there was a couple of times where I wasn't last, but I was very close to being last, all right? And I'm like, wow, how do I keep up with this? I remember one of the DS looking at me one day and going, keep up, son. And I'm like, I can't keep up with that. That's ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? And I told him that. That said, I think he sort of like must have looked at me and thought, well, you're still running, you're still going, you're still there, so you haven't given up. I mean, if you rap, don't you? If you rap, you throw your towel in the air and you go, I'm not doing any more, and that's it, you go home, don't you? So I couldn't wait to get into the trees because I couldn't wait to stop doing these ridiculous beach runs. So eventually we loaded into our teams. We got ourselves onto the helipan and we loaded our choppers, boom, and we flew off into the jungle canopy. And I remember flying across the jungle, and it was a tremendous experience. We're on these Bell Huey helicopters. You've all seen them in the Vietnam films. You sat with your feet on the skids. You're tearing across the treetops. The pilots are putting on a display for you. You know what they're doing, do you know? Because it's alley, isn't it? You like being alley, don't you? So the pilots are like, tick, 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 tick. They're proper giving it some, like, do you know what I mean? And you're sat in the back, like, with the feet on. You're trying to be alley, but you haven't passed selection yet, so you can't be that alley, like, do you know what I mean? But anyway, you're on the skids, and I remember thinking to myself, well, if nothing else, what a tremendous thing to be doing, like, do you know what I mean? Sat on this helicopter, flying across the jungle. So, I was counting the wins, not looking for the losses. I was already sort of like getting the positives together. And this was a massive positive, even if I went home the very next day. Well, what a tremendous thing to do. And I remember flying over, and then all of a sudden the jungle just opened up. And there was a huge helipad with all sorts of activity going on. And obviously people had been there, scratching away in the E-bands. The local people had prepared all this stuff. Got off the chopper, got ourselves into a fire position, chopper lifted off, and we're ushered straight into the trees. And I say, you were all given a piece of kit to take up to the main harbour area. Bang, I can't remember what I had, a couple of jerry cans or something, and off you go. And I remember thinking, wow, this is insane, all right? The first hill that I walked up just to get from the helipad to the harbour area was like 10 times worse than Jacob's Ladder. And I've got my kit on, my belt kit, my Bergen, 2 jerry cans or whatever it is they give me to carry up the hill with, weapon. I'm like, oh my, this is ridiculous. Day one, and I'm already biff chitting it, like, do you know what I mean? I'm like, geez, this is unreal. So we got up there. Now, what you got to understand is when you get into the jungle, everything is treated as if it's tactical. You might be living in a harbour area. You might have some time to yourself, okay, but everything has to be done as if it were tactical, as if you actually had enemy coming to get you. So to that end, you go to the toilet. You go in pairs. Your weapon goes everywhere. At night you stand 2, in the morning you stand 2, and that's the way your life is pretty much going to be. Welcome to the trees. In the next episode then, I'll take you through what was the training phase of the trees, which is massively important, and you learn so much. But moreover for me, it was fun, proper fun.